The city never slept, but it whispered, and in those whispers, Mara could hear the lies that had built her life into a cage. Every night, from the corner of her worn apartment window, she watched the flashing blue and red lights below, the patrol cars moving like predators on the hunt. It had been 10 years since that night, the night her trust was shattered, the night her partner, Officer Dean Keller, had chosen ambition over loyalty and had framed her for a crime she didn't commit. 10 years of silence. 10 years of watching him rise, 10 years of carefully sharpening the edges of her patience. Mara had been the rising star of the precinct, young, meticulous, relentless in her pursuit of justice. But Dean, with his charm and easy smiles, had whispered the right words to the right people, planted evidence in the perfect places, and watched Mara's world crumble in a single press of a button, a single signed warrant. She had gone from leading homicide investigations to cleaning tables in a cafe. Every order she served a bitter reminder of the life stolen from her. Every laugh from her colleagues in uniform was a punch she swallowed in silence. But she had a plan. She had spent the years rebuilding herself quietly, learning to blend into shadows, to make herself invisible, to let Dean believe he had won. And now, she was ready to step back into the world he'd dominated. The first step was patience. Revenge was not a sprint. It was a marathon that would break him slowly, like ice cracking beneath weight he never sensed coming. She began by watching him closely again, noticing the subtle patterns he hadn't thought to hide. Dean's pride was in his reputation. Perfect arrests, commendations, a spotless record. Mara smiled, imagining the tiny fractures she would introduce. A misfiled report here, a manipulated evidence chain there, small doubts in the minds of those she trusted. Every whisper she planted would grow into a storm, but she would let it rise naturally, like poison in water that no one tasted until it was too late. She started with his colleagues. Mara would attend precinct social gatherings under the guise of reconciliation, smile politely, ask innocent questions, and leave subtle suggestions, small enough to seem coincidental. "Dean, are you sure this report matches the evidence?" she asked one evening, her tone soft, almost apologetic. And the seed was planted. A tiny doubt, nothing overt, but enough to make the closest colleagues glance twice, make them notice a slight hesitation where there was none before. Next came the private parts of his life. She had learned everything over the years, his favorite cafes, his golf course, the bars where he met with friends after long shifts. She began appearing in those places, carefully, always at the periphery, a shadow in the corner of his eye, a presence that never addressed him but left him with the sensation that someone was always watching. At night, she would drive past his home in her car, the windows dark, the engine silent, her heart calm but steady. Every glimpse, every passing moment was a thread in the web she was weaving. Then the subtle manipulations began. She sent anonymous tips about minor misconduct, carefully chosen so they would attract internal review without suspicion of her involvement. A small lapse in procedure caught on the precinct cameras, a minor discrepancy in paperwork, an accidental miscommunication about a suspect's whereabouts. Dean felt a cold shadow of paranoia, though he could not name it. He brushed off the unease with a laugh, telling himself he was imagining it, but the cracks were forming. Mara's psychological games deepened as she studied the patterns of Dean's trust. He had a partner now, someone new, young, eager to impress. Mara befriended this new recruit quietly, offering mentorship under the pretense of her experience. She fed subtle warnings, nudged thoughts into the young officer's mind, crafted scenarios where Dean's decisions seemed flawed, his judgments questionable. The young officer began to hesitate in his presence, subtly undermining Dean without ever realizing she was the architect. The years of quiet observation allowed Mara to perfect the timing of every move. She knew when Dean liked to check in on his mother, when he left for early morning patrols, when he had moments of unguarded solitude. Her revenge was not about destruction. It was about control, about creating a sense of unraveling that would consume him from the inside. She began leaving tiny, deliberate mistakes in his personal files, messages from unknown numbers hinting at secrets, blurred images of him at times he did not recall. The feeling of being watched gnawed at him. He was a man of procedure, of rules, and yet the ground beneath him felt unstable. Mara's patience paid off when she orchestrated a seemingly trivial incident at a local precinct celebration. Dean had been praised that evening, an award on his chest, smiles all around, laughter echoing through the hall. Mara appeared in the crowd, disguised as a civilian, smiling politely at the people she had once worked with. She accidentally spilled a drink near her folder of commendations, and in the scramble, subtle alterations were made. Someone had shifted a report, a witness statement went missing. Dean didn't notice immediately, but by the following week, internal reviews had begun questioning his decisions. His mind, once a fortress, became a labyrinth of doubt. He started losing sleep. Every shadow in his office, every whispered comment, every glance from a colleague became a puzzle he could not solve. He did not know Mara was behind it, and that made her invisible hand all the more effective. She never spoke to him directly, never confronted him, but her presence was everywhere. The psychological torment was exquisite, a slow drip that eroded his confidence. He found himself second-guessing his instincts, unable to trust even the evidence in front of him. Mara's revenge was not yet complete. The next stage required him to confront his own betrayals. She carefully curated evidence from his past, minor indiscretions, moments where he had chosen ambition over ethics, and leaked them anonymously to the press. Headlines appeared, subtle enough not to ruin him immediately, but enough to make his superiors question his integrity. His social circle began to shift subtly. Friends distanced themselves, wary of association. Rumors whispered in corridors of power. Dean was crumbling, and he did not know why. She even inserted herself into his investigations indirectly through tips that only she could know to offer, steering his attention in ways that caused minor failures, misjudged arrests, and procedural mishaps. Each misstep seemed coincidental, yet cumulatively they created a narrative of doubt that he could not escape. He began to retreat from the people around him, a man haunted by his own mind, by shadows that seemed to lurk in every corner. Mara observed silently, a ghost of vengeance, feeling the sweet thrill of a plan unfolding perfectly. As months passed, Mara escalated. She arranged a scenario that forced Dean to face an ethical dilemma, one that mirrored the very moment he had betrayed her years ago. A rookie officer was implicated in a case Dean was leading. Evidence was unclear, and Dean was pressured to act quickly. He made the same choice he had once made, prioritizing career over justice. Mara, watching from the shadows, allowed him to feel the guilt fully, to experience the weight of his decision as it played out with devastating consequences for the rookie. Every sleepless night, every glance in the mirror, every isolated moment reminded him of Mara's unseen hand, her patience, her cold precision. She had cost herself much too. She had sacrificed comfort, stability, a simple life, all in pursuit of this revenge. But every sacrifice fueled the satisfaction she would feel when the final act came. The final confrontation would not be immediate. It would be public, undeniable, shattering the illusion he had built around himself. Dean's carefully curated world would collapse, piece by piece, under the invisible pressure of Mara's meticulous design. Mara's patience had been her greatest weapon, and now the city itself seemed to conspire with her. Dean's paranoia had escalated. Every creak of the precinct floorboards, every shuffled paper, every glance from a colleague made him flinch. He no longer trusted his own instincts, and the man who once manipulated others with ease now floundered in self-doubt. The invisible web Mara had spun had tightened, leaving him breathless in its suffocating embrace. She began introducing small, personal provocations, subtle enough to seem accidental, but precise in their psychological effect. Dean would find old photographs placed in his locker, photos he didn't remember taking, images of Mara at the moment of her downfall, smiling with calm resolve while he was climbing the ladder that had destroyed her life. At first, he assumed they were mistakes or pranks, but their repeated appearance began to haunt him. Every time he looked, he felt the weight of an unseen gaze, the implication that someone was watching every move he made. Mara also infiltrated his social life. She found the people he trusted most, the friends and family who relied on his charm and authority, and she whispered doubts in their ears, hints of betrayal, stories half told, incidents that could be interpreted in 100 ways but suggested only one. Dean was not to be trusted. His closest allies began to question him, quietly, subtly withdrawing support, leaving him isolated. Dean's confidence cracked under the pressure, and Mara relished every faltering step. The psychological warfare escalated when Mara orchestrated a public incident during a community event. Dean had been invited as a guest of honor, a figure of law and order, admired by citizens and colleagues alike. Mara ensured a series of minor errors and miscommunications occurred. Arrangements that left Dean appearing disorganized, inattentive, even reckless. Social media picked it up, capturing the chaos, exaggerating it, framing him in moments of indecision. The headlines weren't catastrophic, not yet, but they were enough to stain his spotless record, to make the public notice flaws he had always hidden. Dean's sleepless nights worsened. His dreams were haunted by shadows of Mara, her calm smile, her presence at every misstep he couldn't prevent. He started questioning every decision, reviewing cases obsessively, searching for hidden mistakes, for evidence of sabotage. Mara's handiwork was everywhere and nowhere, so subtle, so precise that he could not trace it, and that was exactly how she wanted it. One evening, after a particularly grueling internal review, Dean found a message slipped under his office door. No sender, just 4 words. "Do you remember me?" His pulse quickened. His mind raced through every officer, every civilian, every informant he had ever encountered, and then it struck him. Mara. He had not seen her in years, yet here she was, omnipresent in the ruins of his psyche. He felt the cold stab of fear, knowing the hunt was no longer one-sided. Mara's next move involved Dean's career. She meticulously planted fabricated complaints, inconsistencies in his reports, and anonymous tips about potential corruption. The internal affairs team, already suspicious due to minor incidents, began monitoring him more closely. Dean felt the walls closing in, the pressure of scrutiny unbearable. Each review, each questioning, chipped away at his ego, at his identity as the untouchable officer he had once been. Mara, watching from the shadows, allowed the tension to mount, her revenge a slow-burning inferno that consumed him from within. As the months passed, Mara introduced the final layer of psychological torment, personal betrayals mirrored from their shared past. Dean had always taken pride in protecting his image, in being the dependable son, brother, friend. Mara manipulated situations where he would fail those closest to him, forcing choices that echoed the very moment he betrayed her years ago. His mother questioned his judgment. His partner hesitated in critical moments. His friends doubted his integrity. Every personal bond became strained, leaving Dean isolated, haunted, and unraveling. Finally, Mara orchestrated the ultimate confrontation, not with guns or threats, but with undeniable exposure. She released compiled evidence of his past indiscretions, of the minor cover-ups and manipulations he had relied on for a decade, to both the press and the Internal Affairs Department simultaneously. The city's media exploded. headlines questioning the integrity of one of the city's most decorated officers. Dean's colleagues, now wary and unsure, stood apart as he struggled to defend himself against a tidal wave of scrutiny. Mara watched remotely, her expression unreadable, her victory complete in its perfection. Dean's empire of respect and control collapsed around him. No one doubted the evidence. No one could dismiss the implications. Mara had exacted her revenge not just by exposing his past betrayal, but by systematically dismantling his present stability, leaving him powerless, haunted, and irrevocably isolated. The psychological torment was exquisite. He understood finally what she had endured for a decade, and the cost he had inflicted upon her became his own nightmare. Even now, Mara paid a personal price. Her life had been one of shadows, patience, and careful calculation. She had sacrificed normalcy, warmth, and comfort. Yet, in the quiet aftermath, watching Dean struggle with the wreckage of his life, she felt a grim satisfaction. The slow-burn revenge had been executed with precision, a carefully orchestrated psychological symphony of betrayal and exposure. But the story was not yet over. In the next stage, Mara would confront Dean in a setting so public, so undeniable, that he would finally see her, not as a shadow or a ghost, but as the architect of his ruin. And she would ensure that the final blow would leave him completely devastated, aware of every step of his downfall, every manipulation, every sleepless night she had imposed upon him. The day Mara chose for the ultimate confrontation was deliberate, symbolic, public, impossible to ignore. The city was hosting a commemorative ceremony for law enforcement heroes, and Dean had been invited as the keynote speaker. He arrived in his polished uniform, unaware that every eye in the room would soon see the intricate web of betrayal Mara had woven around him. Mara entered quietly, dressed in unassuming black, her calm aura concealing the storm she carried. She had prepared for this moment for years, each calculated step of her revenge leading to this public unveiling. Dean did not recognize her at first, and when their eyes met, a flash of confusion crossed his face. Then recognition dawned, and panic followed immediately. Before he could react, the screens around the hall flickered to life, displaying a meticulous timeline of his career and personal transgressions. Every manipulation, every minor betrayal, every unethical decision, every lie he had told, all documented, all irrefutable, was projected for the audience to see. The crowd murmured in disbelief, colleagues shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Mara's voice, calm and precise, echoed through the hall as she narrated the chronology of his betrayals, her tone measured yet cutting. This is what happens when you betray those who trusted you, when you destroy lives for your own gain. Dean tried to speak, tried to defend himself, but every word he uttered fell flat against the avalanche of evidence. Friends he had relied upon avoided eye contact, his partner froze in disbelief, and his family sat in stunned silence. Mara had meticulously ensured that everyone he cared about knew exactly what he had done. The personal humiliation was complete. Then she delivered the most devastating blow, not evidence, not exposure, but a revelation of his emotional vulnerability. Mara recounted private moments, personal memories Dean had assumed were forgotten, intimate betrayals she had suffered at his hands, now laid bare for all to witness. Each story was delivered with precise timing, a psychological hammer striking with surgical precision. Dean's composure shattered, and for the first time, the man who had always controlled others was rendered powerless. The audience watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as Dean broke down completely, the veneer of his authority stripped away. Mara stepped forward, not to gloat, but to ensure the finality of her revenge. She whispered, only loud enough for him to hear, "Do you feel it now? The weight of every choice you made, the pain you inflicted, now mirrored back to you tenfold?" Dean's world collapsed. He had lost everything: reputation, authority, friendships, family trust, and most importantly, control over his own mind. Mara's revenge had been slow, methodical, and devastatingly psychological. The public humiliation was merely the final act in a performance years in the making. Every sleepless night, every paranoia-inducing trick, every whispered doubt Mara had sown had led him here, to a complete and irreversible unraveling. Even as Dean sat defeated, Mara felt the sharp ache of her own sacrifices. Years of plotting, isolation, and obsession had taken their toll. She had endured loneliness, fear, and uncertainty, and she had risked her own stability for the moment of perfect revenge. Yet standing there, seeing the embodiment of her torment unravel in front of everyone, a grim sense of closure settled over her. The cost had been high, but the outcome, absolute justice for her suffering, was beyond satisfying. As the crowd dispersed, whispering and stunned, Mara walked away silently, leaving Dean to face the wreckage alone. He would spend the rest of his life haunted by her actions, replaying every calculated move she had made, tormented by the knowledge that his downfall had been orchestrated with meticulous care. Mara's revenge was complete, psychologically twisting, slow burn, and devastatingly personal. Her name became a silent legend in the precinct, an invisible force, a reminder of the consequences of betrayal, the power of patience, and the terrifying potency of a mind bent on revenge. Mara had achieved something few could. She had made her tormentor experience, in every conceivable way, the magnitude of pain, betrayal, and ruin he had once inflicted on her. In the end, Mara's victory was bittersweet. The slow, meticulous unraveling of Dean's life had taken its toll on her as well. She had lost years of peace, sacrificed friendships, and endured unimaginable stress. But in seeing the man who had shattered her life reduced to nothing, the psychological symmetry of justice brought her a profound, if solemn, satisfaction. Mara disappeared into the night, leaving behind the echoes of a story that would be whispered in precincts and homes alike for years. A story of betrayal, patience, and the terrifying slow-burning power of revenge.